And to unpack this, we're joined by a foreign policy analyst, Bolu Michael-Biyi. Good evening from here. Let me ask you straight up, how do you react to this?
Okay, when I heard the news, I just giggled because it's just Russia doing Russia things. You know, they like to be dramatic sometimes. At the end of one, when they see one drama ending, they try to start with another. I think such fine is not, is just symbolic and it's not practical in any way because no company can realistically pay such amount of money as a fine. It's greater than the world's total economy put together. I think it's just symbolic because it's just a sign to show Russia's irritation for U.S. tech companies or tech companies that are Western powered in any way, and it highlights basically the escalating tension between the tech companies and the Russian government, who is trying to seek control over the information that is being put out there.
But then, what are the legal or financial implications of such huge fine imposed on Google?
Legally, it's impossible to enforce such, and the law will always try to be realistic as much as possible. So it's impossible legally to enforce such. But financially, it could actually force Google to kind of reassess or whether they should remain in Russia. They will try to see whether it's worth it to stay on there because they kind of face the risk of being punished in different ways, and such as asset seizures or extra fines or any other punitive action. All Russia needs to do is to cite compliance issues. So I think they're just looking for a way of pushing out Google, out of the country in an indirect way, and it's just a way to trigger the United States generally, I think.
But then, how does this fine, affect Google's potential response and also their strategy regarding operations in Russia?
It would actually force them to actually sit down and think whether it's worth staying on there. Because, like I said earlier, all Russia needs to do is to cite compliance issues to enforce whatever thing they want to enforce there. So they will, even if Google has not responded to the Russian government anyway. I'm sure they must have sat down and must have decided that keeping silent would be an appropriate response. I think three things can possibly happen. It's either Google gives in to the demands of the Russian government, or they restrict some of their services or operations, or decide entirely to pull out of Russia. So I think the three things they might consider.
But then what signals or message does this send to other foreign, businesses about doing business in Russia?
Well, the message is clear. I think that the message that the Russian government is trying to pass across is that if any company whatsoever, whether tech or not, does not comply with the terms and conditions of the Russian government, they will face the consequences, even if it's just symbolic. And it also states or tries to send the message that should any organization whatsoever, foreign company whatsoever, try not to follow Russia's mandate, then the government will not hesitate to exert its authority. I think Russia may be shooting itself in the foot, being that these companies are huge companies, and if they pull out of Russia, it will lead to severe economic loss. And also people are working with Google, they're going to lose their job, no doubt about it. That's loss of tax, a lot of unemployment in the tech industry in Russia. And, when you have a U.S. company like Google in Russia, that's literally Russia surrounding his enemies if they have Russian workers working there. So I think it wouldn't be it would be a rather funny and unwise decision to ask a U.S. company like Google to leave Russia this time.
Well, thank you so much for your thoughts on the news. Bolu Michael-Biyi, a foreign policy analyst. Many thanks indeed.
Thanks for having me.